Well, thank you for coming. I met Venerable Tendrol almost 18 months ago.
At least.
Yes, at the Interfaith Dialogue at a Korean Buddhist temple. And at that temple, we had someone, we have, of course, the Korean Buddhist community. We also had the one or two representatives from the Egyptian Orthodox Church in Fairfax. And so after that presentation, the Egyptian Orthodox member said, Chaplain Johnson, we want to be involved. And we included them as mentors at the juvenile jail. They've been with us now for 18 months. They also had this orientation. And so about, 2 months ago, I got an email from Venerable Tendrol to say, come and also do this presentation. So let's see what we can do. And again, I extend our invitation. Welcome. Let's team up. Let's work. Let's make the difference. Now, so Justice for Juniors actually is part of the Baptist Protestant chaplaincy. Now, what's unique about it is that our faculty advisor is a Buddhist professor and Buddhist himself. And this may be the only place in North America where you find a Baptist chaplain a Baptist chaplain who is working with Professor Habal, who is a Buddhist and a professor of Eastern religion at George Washington University. And so, so we have justice as an interfaith service and dialogue. So there are three components. We want to reduce juvenile recidivism through mentoring and tutorial session. In that process, we'll do critical thinking, and Mary just explained that process to you. So what does a typical lesson plan of this critical thinking from the perspective of hope and faith formation involve?
So on Sundays and on Mondays, we create a lesson plan about an ethical dilemma. So last week we had one about a girl who had, I think it was leukemia of some sort, and she didn't want to get medical treatment, but the state wanted to intervene on her behalf because they said her parents were being irresponsible. So we had the dilemma as saying, like, is the state right in taking away her mother's role even though her mother agreed with her, or should the state just have let her parents go according with their daughter's wishes?
So the critical thinking they do, again, at that level, we do not do theology, ethics. Now, so because we're focusing on ethics, we can bring Buddhism into it. We can bring Islam. We can bring any other religious tradition. But we must note here that most of the kids are African American. 99% of the kids in DC who are within the juvenile justice system are African American. And by the way, DC has one of the highest, what they call disproportionate minority police contact in the nation. So much so that the formula set by the U.S. Justice Department does not fit the actual facts and data. So, we meet on Mondays and Wednesdays. Of course, we shifted to Mondays and Sunday evenings now at the University of Maryland. And we have several other groups now that are a part of us. We invite groups to come in for interfaith service, meaning the tutorials, because you're focusing only on ethics. And then, not with the kids, not with the youth, but participants, volunteers, then after the conversation, sit down to discuss how the ethical dilemma connects to their faith tradition. So people learn within that context. Because traditionally, the dialogue that occurs is from theology to theology. Your text, the accuracy of it, the historicity of it, or the canonization. All of these issues are classic areas for dialogue. While that is true, our students know very little of these traditions. They're not professionals, they're not theologians, So we focus on behavior. We're saying whatever traditions you have, your behavior speaks of your tradition. Your behavior speaks of your belief. Your behavior is the incarnation of your theology at this point in your development. So how you behave is important. So we have chapel service. This is actually part of the orientation our students actually go through. Okay, so part of the lesson plan consists about comprehension. We'll talk about that.
So comprehension, we have students that come in that come from a range of different reading levels, reading styles. So I usually try to keep it at like a middle school level just so everyone can comprehend it. And it's usually a page and a half long, and we talk about like pop culture, or so sometimes we talk about ethical dilemmas that sports players have with doping and whatnot, or we even talk about things like reparations for people who are formerly slaves and stuff like that, stuff that's of interest to them and that we can relate to larger ethical dilemmas in society. And that's what we do on Sundays, but I know at University of Maryland they offer academic help to students that I think are first generation or have a parent or both parents or guardian in the prison system and other at-risk youth.
Absolutely correct. In other words, we include comprehension, believe it or not. Most of the kids who come in the DC juvenile justice system and the system in Maryland, with which I'm much more familiar with, have very poor reading comprehension skills. Very poor. 2, 3 grades below level, the average level. So yes, the ethical dilemma lessons, therefore, is divided into 2 parts. Students read the article and discuss it, and there are questions for comprehension. And then you go into the conversation about the ethical dilemma. Okay, so, but however, about 98% of them are African Americans, but within the Christian tradition, I focus on liberation theology. For some of you may not be familiar with liberation theology. Liberation theology essentially focuses on or asks the question, how does the biblical narrative communicate the idea that the God of the universe sides with the oppressed? Is God on the side of the oppressed? Is God concerned about the underclass, the underdogs, the marginalized? So, liberation theology focuses on that. And so, we share that essentially with the kids to say, going back to Black history, African Americans had 2 choices. You either believe in the God that is concerned about the oppressed, or you believe in the American Constitution that does not or did not include the condition of slaves into the whole constitutional narrative. African Americans decided to embrace the God of the Bible and place their hopes into that God, believing that that God will one day bring liberation. That is the essence of the growth and thrust of the Black church tradition in the United States. It was grounded in liberation theology long before the idea of quote-unquote liberation theology took form and structure in seminaries among priests, guitarists in South America, who was concerned that the Roman Catholic Church was supporting the upper class, the aristocracy, whereas he read and understood the biblical message as actually being for the oppressed and the underclass. And how do we empower the underclass to be fully human and to realize that full potential in God in Christ. So that movement was also re-echoed here by James Kuhn. He's still alive at Union Theological Seminary, and actually was some of the theological understanding that gave impetus to the civil rights movement. In other words, the civil rights movement was already occurring from this narrative that the Black church tradition across the board already understood. But you had no one from the Black church tradition now to put it in theological, constructive form to be able to engage the rest of the world. So, at the Youth Services Center, we meet, and of course, we divide students into different groups. Now we have students from Catholic University, currently we have about 42 students this semester, and that's the smallest they've had. They've had 100, 120. And we have students from Howard University. We have students from the University of Maryland. And we included about 52 students from the community colleges, three community colleges in Montgomery College, Germantown, Rockville, and Takoma Park, but we have not included them in the actual process yet. But we intend for this to be two pronged. We want for community college students to be involved September, October, and November. Our community volunteers, some of you might be interested, December and January, we actually go to the jail because our college students will be on a break. And then, of course, college students come in February, March, April. And then the community volunteers come in May, June, July, and August. So it's actually 6 months and 6 months. So, okay. Okay, the mentoring session. We have not had the mentoring session at the jail. But we only have the mentoring session at the University of Maryland. Why? Students we meet, you want to tell us about the students we meet and the restrictions they have?
So at the Youth Services Center, there's a lot of restrictions. So we have to go through several different types of security and lock-ins. So they have locks between the different different sections of the facility, and you can't really bring any materials in. And a lot of times they make the students sit away from you, and you're sitting away from the students. So I think it's a little voyeuristic in a way because it's very hard to engage because you're not able to sit next to them. There's already an established hierarchy, so it makes it more difficult in that situation to relate one-on-one to a student.
And that's what we experienced at when I worked at JDC, and we tried to start them. It wasn't even Buddhist, but it was meditative practices. That Fairfax JDC, there were so many restrictions, and as I shared with the chaplain, when some students would fall asleep during meditation, that's when the experience was ended because it felt the administrators felt they were coming to sleep, and I said they were coming to be in a safe environment and relax.
Yes, but
I hear what you're saying.
But let me give you the flip side of that. People are scrupulous. The administrators need to have those structures in place because the reality, kids will tell me the story. You probably have not heard this. And I learned this within the past 6, 7 years. You probably know it. When a kid is working for a drug dealer and the police corners both of them and the adult has massive drugs, what will the adult do? Blame the kid. Not only that, not give it to the kid so the kid have the evidence. And they ask the kid, whose drug is this? Kid will say, my drugs. You know why? The deal is that, are you familiar with alcohol?
Say again?
Are you familiar with Al Capone?
Alcohol. Okay, you know the story? You have to earn your way. You have to earn your stripes. Loyalty. You have to demonstrate it. The kid is going to take it. But also, the kid has less time. Slip on the wrist. You go to juvenile jail. This adult is going to spend 20 years in jail. But what I did not understand until literally about 5 years ago, one of the kids told me, Chaplain Johnson, while I'm in jail, I am being paid. Because I saved the drug dealer time in prison, I took the hit, and he's paying my mama when I get out of here. Chaplain, how much do you earn? When I get out of here, my first pay check will be more than yours. How much do you earn? I say, it's not so much what I earn. They say, oh no. We live in a capitalistic society. You know, I'm on my job, I'm on my beat, so hey. I said, so don't worry about me here. So that is the reality. But also, there's a flip side of that. There are also pimps. So, do you want a pimp visiting someone in jail? Of course. So the administrators have to protect these kids from these predators. That's the reality. And so because of that, I have limited access to these kids. Very limited, even when they're in the shelter. No volunteer can go to the shelter. No volunteer knows where the shelters are. As a chaplain, I know. But I cannot even share with Mary, who's serving in a faith formation capacity and is overseeing the Sunday sessions. I cannot tell her.
Yeah, like I can't exchange my phone number with them if they want to ask for help or something, because that puts the student in a dangerous situation potentially.
Yes. So that is reality administrators have to deal with. So, however, only when you can get permission from the parent when the kid leaves the juvenile justice system. This then calls for a level of advocacy that the chaplain says is now attempting to do. So it is possible to relate to those kids when they leave the juvenile justice system, but that is done in consultation with the knowledge of the court administrators, the juvenile justice administrators, and the consent of the parents, and of course the probation officers, the psychiatrists, and so on. So it's a larger network. So I do understand your concern, but so it calls for a different level of advocacy to continue to make sure that recidivism is reduced. It calls for a network. So this is why I think it's possible for a group like this Saturday morning to meet and to discuss these issues and to say, listen, let's plan to develop a network to be able to follow these kids, and after school, you can invite them with the consent of parents to say after school activity. That gives us much more flexibility, and that is what we're doing. And we have built a relationship with the juvenile jail in DC for the past 7 years. It is only now that we're, because again, just to understand the administrative side and concern, there is liability. And believe it or not, some parents will not follow up these kids. Just last Sunday, were you listening when one of the kids said, when did she discover who her dad was?
Oh, because so two of the girls in the shelter found out they were related because they had the same father.
Hello.
One of the girls grew up in Georgia, but like she was born in DC, but she came back to DC, so she just found out that she had a stepsister. So she's like really like protecting her stepsister because her own mother just died. So she's like, she's the only family I have left now, so I'm gonna take care of her.
But what did the older daughter tell us?
Oh, how she has to fend for herself?
No, fending for herself, but she is saying, I first thought that the man I considered my dad was actually my uncle, who used to visit frequently, and I thought he was my dad. But can you believe that? I mean, this fact goes beyond the level of family dysfunction that any of us can ever imagine. She was in middle school when she realized her uncle was not her dad and her dad was not an uncle. No, this is the level of concern. And this kid is crying, listen, I want to succeed. But not only that, what did she say about having her own children?
Oh, she said she didn't want to have her own children.
I don't want children
her mom.
and a child to go through the experience I've gone through these 17 years. No, I'm not going to have a child. I'm not going to bring a child into this world and go through. And it's again, it's because even the woman that I consider to be my mom, and what did she say?
I wasn't there for that
Oh, okay. So she said, the crisis, the level of poverty, the mental dysfunction, the venom drove every other family member away. Therefore, I'm alone. But I want us to see. In other words, listen, the question then shifts to us who are people of faith. So when I listen to, this is just one person's response. So what do we do as people of compassion with these kids? It's not their fault. What do we do?
And it's also very important that we're volunteering because so many adults in their life take advantage of them. So I recently led a lesson on what sexual assault and sexual harassment is in regards to the Harvey Weinstein thing, and how farm workers also face sexual harassment. And a lot of the guys and girls in the system just learned what sexual harassment was, and she's like, yeah, my social worker touches my thigh, and he offers me gifts and stuff like that. Or even their mom's boyfriends or their dad's girlfriends come after them. One of the boys in the system, he's 15 years old and his baby mama is in her early 20s, and he lives with her.
Now, this is the reality. In other words, if you want to be involved with this type of ministry, you have to be ready for it. You have to be ready and willing to invest the time. And teamwork.
Because they know because one time one volunteer came, and we could tell that the volunteer was just kind of there oh yeah, I'm working with these unfortunate kids, look at me. And the kids knew, and they went up to the volunteer and said oh, do you want to get a picture with us later so you can post it on Facebook that you hung out with some niggas like us, some hood rats like us, you want to post that on Facebook? So they can tell, they can read through you. So it's just really important that because they'll put a front on, but they also know that some other people are putting a front on.
So it does call for compassion, sensitivity. That is why she has actually designed, out of that experience,
oh yeah, another presentation that'll come
yes,
after this.
Yeah, so that people can be aware of their privileges and power and assumptions when they begin to work with kids who are in these particular circumstances.
So this is just some more protocol from the jail. So you have to leave your phones and your valuables in the van or car. They can't be held responsible for that. And you're supposed to dress conservatively. A lot of people are just oh, this is oppressive towards women, but there's a reason why you have to dress conservatively. So just get over it.
There are teenage boys who have kids in jail. That's the reason why. In other words, they had kids before they came to jail. And so they are much more sexually active than most of you in here. And that is the reality. And when you get in there, you don't want them making comments and staring. And so you have to dress conservative. That's the reason why. Yeah.
Yeah, and just going through metal detectors and stuff like that, and you might even get pat down just to prepare yourself. Think about going through TSA security, basically that.
You may say again, why do they do that? People attempt to take drugs into the system with those kids. Mm-hmm. Yes, they do. They've arrested quite some of them. Yeah. Okay, so it's a Sunday team. We want to talk about the Sunday faith formation and the
Yeah, I can talk about
this. Yeah,
this.
please.
So the Sunday team, we meet in the GW Marvin Center. Well, for now, until we get another space, which we're looking for. And we usually, which is the student center of the GW Center. So we sit in a circle with the students, and we like to sit next to the students. So we eliminate this power hierarchy. And a lot of new volunteers are especially some women are uncomfortable with this, sitting next to a guy they don't know or whatnot. But it's very important to do this so the students know that they don't feel like you're above them or something. And it's also an important safety precaution for the students because sometimes the students are in rival gangs, and if they say something in passing about something or something else, you might not understand it in coded language. It's important for people to be between them so they don't like strike at each other, or to like even just having another person between them helps diffuse the situation, which is just an interesting thought, but like it happens.
But also be aware, staff from the shelter accompany these kids.
Oh yeah, that's awesome.
They don't come alone. And almost every one of them have GPS tracking system on them. So the police and the courts know where they are at all times. So even our sitting arrangement has to be done with safety and security in mind. They do not go to the bathrooms alone.
We always have to have everyone in a line of sight because the GW Police Department does know we're on campus, and sometimes like I have personally seen them harass the students just for being there. So we also have to make sure, like for our own responsibility, that someone from the shelter that works with them accompanies them to the restroom. Like we are not allowed to accompany them to the restroom. Someone from the shelter has to accompany them.
So we have these protocols in place for those reasons. Again, safety and security. Yes. So
they usually arrive around like 10:30ish, and then at once they like use the restroom and whatnot, we sit down and we discuss the lesson. And it's always very interesting to hear new perspectives of students, or even they're like, oh, like I'm not about to read this. Like once we start talking about it, they get really into it, and we leave room. I try to keep the paragraphs like short because a lot of the times they like to break out into more discussions because that's what most of the students are used to. Like they don't want to hear you lecture at them. They're like, if you're just like blabbing on and on, and like if you're not engaging them, like you're not getting on their level, and they just lose interest. Yeah, that's very important. And then when then we'll like break for about 15 minutes after that, and like the last 30 minutes are dedicated to faith formation, which is we use I mean it's based in Christian tradition, but we relate it to Islamic teachings in particular, because a lot of the students that we work with are Muslim as well. Maybe like I would say maybe a quarter or half,
yes.
Depending on the situation. So we try to relate it to that. So when it was Ramadan, like I try to talk about like fasting in the Christian tradition, like how Islam also does it, and, like they serve the same purpose and whatnot to like try and like purify yourself and whatnot. Just little things related to that, or asking students who come from different faith traditions, like, oh, like does your family have a tradition that's similar to like this tradition, or can you think of an example of when you went to church with your grandma, what did you do that related to this? So like it helps like build bridges between like different cultures and like different faith traditions for them.
And I must add, in Washington, D.C., most of these kids are familiar with both the Christian and Islamic tradition. Their parents might be, dad might be Muslim, the mother is Christian, the grandmother goes to church. And the kids, when they come to the juvenile justice system, are for the first time attempting to inquire about faith formation issues. So the dynamics within the juvenile justice system plays a key role in determining. So because these kids lack structure on the outside, Islam is an appeal to them because there is structure in Islam. And so even in the adult system, people practice religion because they need protection from other adults because of the Islamic community. The same thing holds true. Even though the juvenile system is much safer than the adult, the whole idea of learning a different language. These kids memorize Islamic prayers almost overnight. And they begin to study the Quran. And they begin to learn how to read Arabic. These are kids who classify as special ed. I mean, what is the cause of this major shift? Because they are focused, because there's also the competition, peer pressure to succeed, to be able to do this. All of these factors play into a focus to find religious tradition. And again, the appeal, believe it or not, is much more to Islam than Christianity, as they tell me, as I've experienced within the juvenile jail. Why? Several factors. One, structure. High expectations. Muslims don't do that. Thirdly, you have some staff Islamic style. In fact, it's been quite a long tradition, I know, within DC, where an attempt had been made to employ people with prison background who themselves have been prisoners to work with these kids because they have turned their lives around. In fact, one of the drug kingpins in DC spent 15 years in North Carolina and came back, and he said he had to work at Burger King because after 15 years he made up his mind that was not a part of his life. He said one of my greatest challenges was to see some of his old customers see him through the window. Hey, where have you been? where have you been? Man, we need to talk after here. He said, oh no, I'm out of that business. And he would share his personal story, how he got his life together, got two jobs. And he said, look, Chaplain Johnson, I'll be honest with you. I'll make several $1,000s a week when I was in D.C. Several thousands a week. And I was reckless. I had 8 different girlfriends in 8 different apartments, and I could afford it. He said, I was living the life.
And that's what a lot of these, especially the boys, are drawn to. They're like, oh, like, why am I going to go to college and then, like, get $50,000 when I can make, like, that amount of money in a month? I can make fast money. But, like, when we talk about more of, like, ethical dilemmas and, like, how much money you're actually going to make and the risk that entails to be a drug kingpin, a lot of them are like, oh, no, like, maybe I should go be a lawyer, but then I can rip people off that way, too. And it's like, oh, that is true, like, you can do that.
So, these are wonderful kids. And we will end this session, and then she will begin the second session. But she is working on the second session, so I'll have very little to say. Go ahead.
Okay, this is the chapel service. Other components.
No, the
oh yeah.
Cultural issues, the racial issues that play into.
Oh yeah, I just didn't know where you saved it. Thank you. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I don't want to forget. I hope this wonderful team can take a picture so we can send it to our college and say, this is the team that is coming up.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I can just tap through like this. Okay,
Yes.
so as Chaplain Johnson said earlier, about 99% of the students we serve are Black or African American. And a lot of times we just talk about racism, white and Black racism, like it's just white people versus Black people. But a lot of times, like I can say this, like my mom is Chinese and my dad is Mexican. There's anti-Blackness in both of my communities. And my dad is like actually part Caribbean, and he's like, oh no, like I'm not Black. I'm like, Dad, you have an afro, like you are part Black. and that's just like some internalized anti-Blackness that communities of color face. So I really wanted to take some time to talk about racism specifically targeting Black students and like what they face, because a lot of times this isn't talked about. So what is anti-Blackness? As I said earlier, like all communities of color suffer from different forms of oppression that racism causes, and members of the Black community, especially in this country, face another level of oppression. And both white people and non-Black people of color are guilty of perpetuating and even benefiting from it. So like an example of this would be rock and roll stars benefiting from Chuck Berry developing certain forms of rock and roll and profiting from it when he might not have benefited from it. Or even like the rapper Eminem has said, like, people wouldn't buy my albums if I was dark skinned and Black. People buy my albums because I have blue eyes and blonde hair, and that's his benefit of being white in society. And anti-Blackness has its origins in the creation of race. We all, most of us know, like, race is a social construct, and people are like, oh, if it's just a social construct, like, it's not a big deal, like, we're all one human family. And, like, that is true, but it does have real effects that we can see every day in society. And how does it manifest in general society? So these are just some pictures. So one of them is a screen grab from the New York Times. It said, FBI's dangerous crackdown on Black identity extremists, referring to Black Lives Matter movement. Or even this picture from Vogue. This is Giselle Bundchen, and LeBron James, but even like that may seem like very like blatant. It's like, oh, like he's a basketball player, like of course he's gonna have this fierce stance, but you can see it's just like tying into this narrative of black being bad or animalistic, and you can see that like destroy this mad brute, and that's an advertisement from I believe World War I. And a more obvious form of anti-blackness would be Dylan Roof and that situation in Charleston, or even the idea that like people that of different color of like that are not black have certain like roles in society that perpetuate anti-blackness, like I can talk specifically for Chinese people, like, oh, like the model minority status, like, oh, Chinese people are like so intellectually superior or whatnot, or like even people have told me they're like, oh, like you didn't like really work for that grade, it's just that you're Chinese so you're naturally smarter. Which like obviously isn't true. Like I just had to study the same math test you did, like nothing in my brain is that different from yours, like maybe I just studied more, but it's just like little things like that are like perpetuations of racism. But the black community in particular is like racially coded language. So for example, we had one volunteer come in who was white. He came in and said like, oh, I'm not familiar with the ideas of like, or the issues with that community or those people, and he pointed at the students, and the students heard that, and they knew like maybe like the volunteer didn't realize that was racially coded language, but using words like, oh, those people, and like you're using like your finger, like index finger point, like that's really racist, and that's just so internalized and ingrained in our society that a lot of people just don't realize it. And it can be innocent, but it does have damaging effects for like especially the kids there. They're like, one of the kids is like, I'm not gonna sit next to that guy, like he's like, he's a racist mother. Yeah. I'm just like, I said like, I see what you're saying, but like maybe he just doesn't know. And he's like, well, he has no excuse, like Google is too free for that. I'm like, that's true, like he should educate himself, and Google is free for now. So
for now,
yeah. So anti-blackness in communities of color. So these are just some examples. So this was a commercial that played in China. So this woman was going to kiss a black man, but then she stuck him in a washing machine, and he came out as a Chinese man.
Oh wow!
Yeah.
So that's an example of racism.
I saw that one. Wow.
And this is a movie called Pelo Malo, and like that means bad hair. So it's a story about this boy dealing with like his identity as like being Afro-Latino. And his parents wouldn't let him take his school picture unless he got his hair straightened because they said he had bad hair, which is just really sad. And I just want to take this moment to talk about like, can we think of any examples in our own communities of anti-blackness? I mean, I can start. So, my cousin, her kids are half black, and my grandparents, like they don't treat the kids any differently because like that's their own blood, but they're to my cousin, they're like, why'd you marry this black man? Like they're like, you couldn't find one with lighter skin? Stuff like that. Just like subtle forms of racism like that. Or even saying like, oh, those black people are so lazy, like look at all of them. Like not realizing like the structure of racism has had an impact on, or even laws about starting new businesses that benefit immigrants don't benefit poorer members of this communities that we live in.
I have a friend who's Greek Orthodox, and she's married to an African American man. And my friend and I were in West Virginia, and it was me, obviously, I'm a Caucasian woman, and then my friend who's Greek, and her 3 children, and people kept coming up to us saying, "Oh, did you adopt those children?" Because they couldn't,
conceive.
just fathom different races coming together.
Yeah, I have a friend who's African American. She said, when her teenage son would go shopping, in the stores, then the security guards would diligently follow him as long as he was in the store and usher him.
And that's the thing that a lot of our students talk about. Like
Yes.
So one of the girls was going to apply for a job at a really popular store, and they followed her around thinking that she was going to steal something when she was just looking for a paper for a job application.
Oh.
So that's just another level I wouldn't necessarily face like especially my mother, who is like Asian, would probably not face because she's Asian, so people would assume that she's not there for that. They assume she's there to shop or something.
It's the whole concept of white privilege as well. When I worked at JDC, we would talk about that of I went into a store and one of my students went into a store, we may be treated completely differently. And is it right? Absolutely not. So how do we address? It's kind of another ethical dilemma.
Yeah, and especially when we talk about these ethical dilemmas in our lessons, if a lot of some of the like really well-meaning volunteers, they might say something like, "Oh yeah, like I faced like such troubles in my life," and the students are just like, because like they see what these some of the volunteers are wearing. They're like, "You're wearing a Fossil watch and you're wearing J. Crew. Like I'm sure like you just been through the gutter, and like maybe some people have, but like it's about being street smart. Like you have to like know how to read someone immediately in order to like, am I gonna run from this person or like try to hustle this person? Like they know, so it's stuff like that. So how can we combat anti-Blackness in our own communities? And working with Justice for Juniors is maybe a way for you to do this in your own personal life, because you have to be an active member of engaging the Black community to work towards helping mitigate impacts that slavery has had in American society in particular, especially in this region of the country, or even the predatory nature of the school to prison pipeline system, because it's very predatory. And I mean, I'm still shocked what I learn every day about how certain members of like that work, the administrative side of it, prey on these children, and how they make money off these children from being in the system. And it's a little ridiculous. And what does anti-Blackness mean to Justice for Juniors? So Justice for Juniors actively confronts forms of white supremacy that specifically target lower income communities and Black communities, such as school to prison pipeline and mass incarceration. And we hope in reaching out to like different communities, different faith communities, different communities of color that aren't Black, we hope to end this cycle of students being entrapped in the system and helping them liberate themselves. And I think it's really important, as one student pointed out when we were talking about this one time, he's like, yeah, it's like cool and all that you were talking to me about this, but this isn't gonna put food in my mouth. Mm-hmm. And I said, yeah. He's like, you know, like he's like selling drugs. Like, hey, that's the easiest way for me to make money. I gotta make sure me and mine are fed. And I said, that's true, but this might help you make different decisions based on how to make money and how you can make money, and just little things like that. He said, that's true too. So, I mean, we're not putting food in people's mouth, but we are teaching them critical thinking skills that may benefit them in the future.
That also puts the burden on us to then, in addition to just the ethical dilemma questions, the comprehension, helping them to develop comprehension skills, to move into public policy. Justice for Junior presents a juvenile justice public policy annually. In other words, we engage the experts in DC and Maryland. For example, you were a special education teacher, right? In April, we're having a forum at Howard University, I think it's April 6th, focusing on how students who have mental health issues within the juvenile justice system are identified and treated. Who's asking the question? Who's asking these questions? Yes, there is, over the past, I think, 2 years, the DC City Council have been, not DC City Council, the juvenile subcommittee team of the courts. I serve on that committee. That's the question they have been grappling with. When a kid is identified as having mental health issues, because that's the first thing to do. Once you go in, there is an educational analysis, there is a mental health analysis, and also a physical health analysis of each person who is detained, arrested. And the next step, of course, the mental health issues, you are referred as a social worker, a counselor to be able to work these things. But once you get to the courts, the defense attorney will be interested in knowing to what extent did your mental health contribute, or your state of mind contribute to your behavior for which you're being charged. In those instances, the courts, the judges have been referring those kids who fell into this category to local psychiatric facility. And the difficulty with some of those issues has been that some of these kids who've actually taken synthetic drugs are more violent, volatile, unpredictable, and it causes a strain on the psychiatric facility because there has to be one-on-one, line of sight observation. The psychiatric facility may not be able to afford it because whereas you had 2 staff taking care of 12 kids, now you have to have an additional expense, get someone in on three different shifts to make sure this kid is safe. And the psychiatric facilities are saying, we can't afford it. Or, can the government pay for our services?
Or even a lot of students that I realize maybe some of the students have, like, because I have friends that have Asperger's, like some of the students do have Asperger's, but people have just been so quick to criminalize them or say like, oh, they're lazy, but they do have like, they're not neurotypical. And a lot of their schools just don't have the resources to realize that. But they might be like so bright, but they just can't socialize in like a neurotypical fashion. But it's just an unfortunate situation where like a social circumstance predicament, and even like skin color affects the way you're perceived. Whereas like someone with Asperger's who's white like might be more readily identifiable because they conform to a certain standard of like what we define what Asperger's is, or someone who is on the autism spectrum acts like.
Right. So consequently, these kids are sometimes referred back to the shelter or back to the jail. So we are having the forum to raise those questions. And then our college students are teamed up to maybe request the Department of Juvenile Services to say, what can you do about it? So these are ways that our students can be involved in terms of advocacy. But next year, hopefully, we are hoping that when we are in conversation in DC with the co-social services, when these kids exit the probation system, if it will be possible in consultation with the parents and consent to be able to follow them up. Now, in order to do that, we need tons of volunteers because that's what it will really take. And these volunteers can be college students, they can be adults, and they could possibly be peer mentors, high schools. So those are areas we're actually exploring. So it could be possible that a year from now, if all of you can team along with us, we can put these basic plans into action in identifying volunteers in the community, in the schools, in churches, mosques, communities. And by the way, we are already collaborating with Dalahaj Mosque in Falls Church. They come to the jail to tutor. And also, in addition to the public policy, we try to also to have gifts for them for Christmas. I think 2 of you have already contributed, Venerable Tendrol. I know it's actually lit because we asked them about over a month ago, please send us the list of the kids the gifts that they will need, basic stuff, gloves and basic items that the kids will use for Christmas. So those are ways that your temple can collaborate with us. And if you know of other temples in the Northern Virginia area, please, we need to have a plan of action in place to see how we can reach out to these kids, especially when they leave the system, to have the necessary support in place. So any questions so far for you?
Can you say a little bit more about the Monday night?
Monday nights. If you're interested in tutoring Monday nights, I will send a form to her where you complete them, bring them in, and then it will take a week because they have to make sure that no one is on the pedophile list. And then, because you've already done this orientation, there will be another orientation called the safety protocol orientation at the jail. So if you're interested, I'll make sure that Venerable Tendrol has the applications and you can come in.
Where is the tutoring again, Chaplain?
At the jail, it's next to Gallaudet University on the Red Line in DC. At 1000 Mount Oliver Road. I'll send all of that information to the Venerable to make sure that I will even possibly look in my van to see if I have an application that I can give on to you. But it will be good to come in. First of all, the form has to be completed and sent in. And then you can come in all of January, and then we can actually sign up other people primarily for the summer. But you can come in now, December to January, to actually participate at the jail, the juvenile jail, from 6 to 8 p.m. on Mondays. It is next to Gallaudet University. It's easy to find. And you're welcome to come in and check it out. And it is not required that you're there every Monday. We know you have kids, whenever you can. But it will give you just a feel of what it's like.
So like a lot of the service fraternities and sororities that we work with, or like other forms of organizations in Greek life, they'll come up with like a list of volunteers, like who's going in which week or which month you're gonna like go, and that's worked really well for them, especially coming in on Sundays. So we have like an idea of who's going to be there and who's not going to be there.
Any other question? If not, thank you. So, Venerable, will you come up and representation?
I was going to, well, first of all, thank you very much. Thank you for coming. And that was a great presentation, and we'll definitely follow up. I met Chaplain Johnson, as he mentioned, 18 months ago. I actually thought it was longer. But it was at an interfaith gathering, and what I remember the most about it, we had several very good presentations, but it was Chaplain Johnson's talk that really, I think, motivated the group to not just talk about justice and talk about peace, love, and kindness, but to actually, go out and do something about it. And the Buddhist community has typically been a little bit more contemplative, a little bit more of, meditation and centering and good stuff. And we're just, I think, particularly in the West, realizing that we need to actually, really practice what we call engaged bodhicitta, where we're actually out there in the community.
And I think it'll be so valuable because, like, I keep on telling the students, they're like, oh, are you guys getting paid for this? Like, they're like, why are you here? Like, they're like, oh, because, like, are you wasting your time? I'm like, no, like, I'm volunteering. And they're like, for community service? Like, did you, what'd you get yourself into? Yeah. And I was like, no, like, I'm here because I want to be here. And it means a lot to them that people that they don't know or, like, they might not normally walk into on a daily basis, like, actually care, like, are volunteering, like, they're not getting any kickback from it or something.
It's not about the hustle.
Yeah, it's not about the hustle, exactly. Like, it's just, like, a welcome relief for them to say, like, oh, this random person I don't know is willing to spend an hour or 2 hours with me just trying to talk to me. And, like, some of them, like, are very hesitant still about it at first, but a lot of them, like, do openly appreciate it, even if they might not show it to your face. They really are. And I just want to thank you for taking the time to be here on a snowy Saturday morning to listen to us. Yes, sir.
How long did it take you for them to warm up? Could you share something?
Oh,
some
sure.
insight?
So I think I came from a slightly different background, but I started in June, but, like, it took maybe a month once they saw my face and whatnot. And then one time they're like, Mary, like, why are you really interested in it? And, like, I've had cousins who have been in gangs in, like, New York City, and like they've been part of the like the I mean, I've seen like what they've gone through like in the justice system, and like it's really messed up, like the amount of people that make so much money off them. It's disgusting. It's really bad. So like once I told them that, like they warmed up to me a little more, but just by being there and like willing to talk to them, or even like just by being there, like if they see your face enough, because like the kids talk to each other, so like they'll say like, oh, like yeah, like this person was here, or like this person was there, or like, oh, like this person's kind of funny, or like this person's really quiet but they seem nice. Like they'll talk to each other, like even if like we haven't, so like some of them come back into the system and they're like, oh yeah, I remember you, except like you were wearing glasses last time, or like or stuff like that. And they're like, you don't wear glasses in a while. They're like, oh, like I really like that lipstick you were wearing last time. Like where'd you get it? like stuff like that. Just like little things. Like they might not like show that they're interested in you, or like that they even like you. But if they're just like not like, if they're not just like being aggressive towards you, you can assume like they're fine with you.
If I could
Just
just add
depending
to
on the
that,
student. Yeah.
it takes time for them to trust you,
Because so many people
because
take
they
advantage
deal with
of
trust issue throughout their life. So don't take an exception if they don't warm up to you quickly.
It seems like going consistently would be
Yes.
important too.
Or just saying, I'm with this group.
Anybody.
Yes.
Right?
But much more so with them, because there are people in and out of their lives, including parents.
Yeah, it's like really the only people that they really trust are their grandmas, because
Yes.
it's like usually the grandma or the grandpa is the one who's the most stable influence in their lives most of the time, majority speaking. Or if you say like, oh, I'm like with this organization, and they associate you with people coming from this organization, and you're like people from this organization are going there constantly, like they understand like people have lives and stuff. But if you say like, oh, like I'm with this organization, and this organization like comes here often, or like they come here at least every once in a while, or like they even recognize the name of like, oh, Buddhist temple, like people are here. So
Mary, I had a question for you, or maybe Chaplain. So, do you see some sort of behavioral site where there is a leader within, and if you can tap into a leader, he taps into the rest of the bunch of people if you're trying to penetrate
it really depends with the group. So I think it's a little, they react, I think with the girls, like they're more, like you can see who's more talkative, and like who is like more dominant. It's like usually the oldest girl in the group is more dominant. It's usually like the biggest guy in the group is like more dominant, but it also depends on how they interact with you. So like they might have a different interaction with me and Chaplain Johnson. Like someone might come off as a leader to Chaplain Johnson, or like I'm only 21, so like they like don't really like come off as like, oh, I'm the leader here in this situation. Like once they become more comfortable with you, or like they like have an idea of who the authority figure is, and you show them respect and whatnot. Like I call them students, I don't call them kids, because I'm so close in age to them. I just kind of feel weird doing it, to be honest. But if like Chaplain Johnson calls them kids, like they're fine with that, but I'm not going to call them a kid, because I'm going to try to show them the same respect, especially since we're so close, and I'm like almost the same age as all of them. So if they can tell like you're trying to respect them and whatnot, and like so in the beginning like we go off and like talk about each other's names, it's not like the hierarchy like kind of dissipates like if we're like we're on a first name basis. Or some of the times the kids like will give you like a fake name to you, like they're like, oh, like my name is like, I forget, one of the kids like said his name was another thing, but all the other kids were like, no, his name is actually this, like you call him this. Or like, yeah, and a lot of the times like the older kids in the system like will say like, or this is more common with the boys, he's like, you see that kid over there? That kid's my son. I take care of him. It's like, yeah, it's really funny, but yeah, the leader, like who is the leader? It depends on the situation, because so many of the kids come in and out. Like we might have someone for a few weeks and whatnot, but because they talk so much, they have an idea of like who the leader is in our situation, and like they can, like if someone like another adult comes in this situation and just starts talking, they might get like one of our other volunteers, she showed up later in the session and they got really aggressive with her. They're like, you're not in charge of the session, like, what are you doing?
Or protective.
Yeah, they get very, like, territorial with us sometimes, or, like, but, like, you even have to be, protective of them, and, like, especially at the Sunday session, since we're, like, in a public space, like, some people, like, look at them differently, or, like, even, like, one student at the university we were at, like, said something, like, really, like, I'm not gonna repeat it, but it was, like, pretty rude towards them, and they could hear it, like, 'cause they were in an earshot, so I had to go in and confront her in front of them to make sure, like, that's how I built up my social credit, by confronting other people for them, or, like, not talking on their behalf, but, like, they knew they couldn't really say anything, because they would get in trouble if they went up and said something to her.
I have a question. So the sessions that you do hold, are those like, is it like a program where it's the same group of students or kids, or is it just one independent topic that you go into, and anyone can go into that? I'm just kind of
Oh, sure.
wondering.
So on Sundays, we have a different lesson plan each time. So, like, it's like usually like on a current events topic. So another thing is that I've been trying to implement is a lot of them have gaps in like they're familiar with pop culture stuff and whatnot, but some of them have gaps in like what they've learned in like social studies or history. I'm not sure what they call it nowadays. So some of them have gaps in that. So we try to relate it back to like a historical thing, or like maybe like even a law or something, because some kids are like, oh, like I'm interested in the law, or like we'll talk about like a medical legal issue. So like they were interested in like learning about like medicine. Some of them will be doctors, so maybe we'll find like an ethical dilemma relating to medicine that we can all talk about, and try to like pique their interest. So as far as like as far as like which students show up on, this is just relating to Sundays, because like you usually have the same group on Mondays, I think, but it just depends on the shelter, because some of them, they might not have enough shelter workers there, or some of the students might be on lockdown, meaning that enough of them have committed a crime in a certain area that they're not allowed to go to that area. So like we'll know like maybe 30 minutes in advance or 15 minutes in advance if they can't make it. But like consistently there's been about 15 students, and like, you can like come in at like we don't like follow like a semester long lesson plan. We just like take it week by week.
Any other
That's
questions?
great information, thank you.
No, thank you for coming.
I'm still confused on how, what role do we actually play? I thought I come to this meeting to hear some like rule of engagement. Like, I thought I was supposed to be writing letters or correspondence. So
Oh, I'll talk about the letter writing, but
already.
but I mean, in terms of our volunteering and
Oh yeah, so you
juveniles
could,
for justice, we could do Monday nights or
Yeah,
Sunday nights or Sunday
oh
mornings.
yeah, you could do Monday nights or Sunday mornings. So you come in as a volunteer, and I would try to, or like we would try to disperse like the lesson in advance, so like we can like all read it. It's usually just a page and a half of the lesson, and then we have like 5 comprehension questions, 5 ethical dilemma questions, so you can familiarize yourself with it. But the role of the volunteer, especially in this capacity, is just to like be there and discuss and like interact with the students that we work with. It's a very flexible capacity.
Right,
and
but
Chaplain
also,
Johnson will go more
once
into
we
it.
develop the public policy component, there will be the opportunity, because what we do for the public policy component, say for the topic, the identification and treatment of kids within the juvenile justice system, we have a committee called the Forum Committee of the chaplaincy. The Forum Committee consists of a chair and 2 attorneys who are part of, actually from the church of St. Mark Orthodox Church here in Fairfax. There's also a professor of history from the University of Maryland. There's a professor of sociology from Catholic University, and it's also that's me. We have students from the different colleges who want to be a part of the forum. They're interested in advocacy. So we give them articles on the topic. They read the articles and they design questions for the panelists who are actually experts on the topic. So the students get some experience on what the issues are. Now, once the forum occurs, the next step for those who are interested in advocacy will say, we want to meet with the director of the Youth Rehabilitation Services. We want to meet with the mayor. We want to meet with commissioner, whatever commissioner that is dealing with this. That's what your letter writing and meetings actually is going to be a part of that. So there is advocacy for them. And of course, help the Christmas gifts for them in the shelters. But also Eid, when Ramadan ends, those who are Muslims, we also want to get gifts of them, take it to them. So you have the opportunity to actually tutor ethics. You have the opportunity to help them with the process, depending on your academic background, your interests, or to write a letter once the committee says, this is the issue we want to learn more of. Again, I'm on the committee of the subcommittee of the courts in DC, the DC Superior Court. I attend the meetings. So those issues that the subcommittee deals with, that goes to the DC City Council, I'm already aware of them. I take our topics from those issues because they are current. Then our students can be involved in the letter writing campaign and the meetings. You also have the meeting to opportunity to help them with practical things that they need. For example, we're hoping that once we expand our base, this is why it is so important, because that we expand and get volunteers from the community. We want to be able to help these kids once they leave the shelters, when they're going back to school, with backpacks, books, whatever practical things you can help them with. But we're not there yet. First of all, we want to make sure that we have sufficient volunteers and actually do this. Not this academic year, but possibly the following year. So there are a lot of opportunities where you can work with these kids. And once we get the permission from the courts and the parents, we want a place where we can begin to actually tutor these kids, and our college students at the University of Maryland have already begun to do that. Again, the goal is, once you go to jail, please don't go back. But they need that basic support because it's simply not there. The recidivism rate in DC is almost 50%. Yes. They're
So
in and
often
out.
they get out, and then there's wraparound
Right.
services. over there,
Exactly so.
So they go back to what they know.
Oh yeah, and like sometimes like, oh, like my mom or dad's not home, like to feed me, I have to feed myself. How am I gonna feed myself? What's the fastest way to make some money so I can buy a rotisserie chicken from the grocery store versus going to McDonald's? Or like, how much money do I need to get to even like feed myself, to make myself feel full? And that's often the fastest way. And I think calling this grassroots development is very, it's like the most compact way to describe what we do, because we talk to the students, we get a good understanding of what they need. They tell us what they need and what they want, and we try to advocate for this like at different varying levels of the governmental system or even in society. Like even talking about this with other people is very important, so people get a better understanding of it. But there's also like the political action needed behind it to make sure these things are changed. Like even like every little thing counts. Like it might seem like an enormous issue, but even believing that it can change is very important to keep in mind.
I have a question for Tendrol. So in terms of structuring some of the things that you can teach to these kids, are you allowed to teach them something like meditation?
Yes. Once the parents have consented, the key is parental consent. So once you do that and have a safe place, and of course, it may have to be in the location or the neighborhood or the community of the kids. That is why we are on 3 universities. An arrangement can be made where the kids can come. But again, don't assume that some of the basics issues will be there. Even going from home to that location, we have to find smart trips for those kids to make it. Right, because you assume you get in your car and go, not for those kids. So those things have to be in place. So in other words, after this presentation, I'm going to email Venerable Tendrol and say, look, here's a summary of what we discussed. How can we meet again, maybe on another Saturday, to organize? I'm going to give you the forms where people come to complete. Bring your friends in. Organize as a Buddhist temple. How are you going to best organize to reach your community, your friends, the high school, and to make this happen?
And I think meditation would be so valuable. Because some of the students are like, oh, like what's meditation? You just like it's like, no, it's a lot more than that. So like I can just say this for like the students who I've talked to that are like come from Catholic backgrounds, like when your grandmother prays the rosary, like what is that? Like she's repeating a prayer like for a certain amount of time. It's that is a form of like meditative prayer, because you're calming your mind, you're focusing on one object or like one objective of a certain extent. And I think it would be very useful for, I mean, it would be useful for the girls and whatnot, but like a lot of the boys with like wanting to display masculinity, they're like, oh, like when I get in a fight, I'm just gonna rage with someone, like I'm gonna go after him, like, you know, because it's like, you have to like demonstrate masculinity or like a certain power dynamic to get like respect to a certain extent. But I think just learning meditation or like taking a moment to pause and think for a moment and calm yourself would be very useful for them in thinking through critical thinking skills and helping them make better decisions. And obviously like the mental health benefits, but those are just like the more like obvious things to them that would help.
I think Buddhists are not good at counseling because we don't have training in it. I think all of the temples don't have that components. For example, the Huang Yin Temple, the one down in Fort Belvoir. A few years ago, there was a man who had jobs, but lost his jobs. He went to the temple, and nobody helped him out, and he ended up committed suicide.
Oh no.
And yeah, we're very good at, say, individual meditation, but when it comes to counseling, it's not as good as the Catholics. So we need to have training. Because I did this 2 years ago, and I think I was drowning in it because we don't have the capability.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
I think that we need resources because
Yeah.
Normally we more focusing on fixing ourselves and our mind frame, but we forget that at the temple that I serve, also we have people who came in and said, hey, I need to I need to get some medication, and I just don't have enough for the copay. Can you help me? And so we, out of compassion, we said, yeah, sure, even though it's very temporary, but those kind of people, if I know a source, hey, if ever you need help, you can come and get this, or you can call this place or these group, this organization, then you can get more of a steady help and guidance rather than just very temporary. And I think that's what we need.
Right. I come from a Black Baptist. I'm a member of 19th Street Baptist Church. What the Black Baptist churches and other churches in the United States have done, they have associations of churches. Those associations pool their resources. And out of those resources, they have full-time staff that are involved in social justice. And part of their job description is to be able to identify state, federal resources, community resources, where they can refer, and they'll work with other pastors within those congregations. So they have a structure already in place. Now, so for us, we are, as a chaplaincy, saying, because you see, for example, when all the students we work with, they should automatically have insurance through their parents or the state. So those major issues are not a part of our concern, because they will provide insurance, or as some of them actually water the state. Yeah, because once you're in the system, the government actually is responsible. So they have social workers, they have psychiatrists, they have Department of Mental Health that takes care of those things. So we don't have that level of complexity for the kids we work with.
But I think it's also because a lot of the students have said to me like they have like really deep anxiety disorders and like they don't like taking all the medication because they can't think properly. So maybe if they can contextualize it and saying like maybe I can like transform my mindset, or like a lot of them have depression, but like some people like just don't have the neurotransmitters, but a lot of them say like maybe I could just like change my mindset and I can like learn how to like deal with this issue internally and be comfortable being with myself and different coping strategies. I still think Buddhism offers like something that some other churches just like don't have the mindset of offering because that's not part of the practice. So I think maybe approaching from that angle.
Actually, I disagree with that.
Oh, okay.
I really disagree with that. Whatever Buddha told, I think it could be used in any context.
Oh yeah, I'm just saying like Christian churches
back
context.
to him, and I'm saying it very humbly. This is not defensive.
No, certainly.
But then I think what we lack is how to put that in practical perspective. I know Buddha said that you should focus on yourself. If you don't know yourself, how are you going to help others? That's what he said. But then the merit part of what we earn, unless you have the merit, you don't have the wisdom. It's together.
Engage bodhicitta.
Engaged, yeah. So that part probably we miss out on, and that's our personal fault, my fault, as opposed to the teachings not teaching that.
Right.
That's all.
So again, I think this dovetails right into the very reason why we're here. To look for opportunities to organize, to serve, to express compassion.
True.
And I have a question for the troubled youth. After, let's say, they get out, and then they focus on studying, and then eventually they have to make the decision: am I going to college? How will they get help? Because
Okay, great question. We did not tell you this. We also have a college access program. Now, and I'll email those things to you. The college access program, we identify those kids, number one. If you yourself grew up in a juvenile justice system, but so did a parent, you qualify. If you are a recent immigrant, English is not your first language, and you're grappling with the English language, you're a junior or a senior, you qualify. If you are a person applying to college for the very first time in your family, you qualify. What we do, we take these students and we assign them, we take them in a junior year, and we work with them to draft their essays, their college essays. And then, over the summer, our college students work along with them to find prospective grants and scholarships. So we have that in place. In fact, we just ended the first year of that process. So there is another thing. Your high school students or college students in your family can actually be involved in that, to help take them through the process.
I think it's also valuable that
Yes.
a lot of community college students are involved, because a lot of the students are like, oh, I either have to go to a community college, vocational technical, or go to a four-year college. And for some people, like, community college, like, what they want to do, like, that serves their interest. Like, a lot of the girls want to be cosmetologists. Like, going to a technical program might be the best fit for them. Like, a four-year college isn't the best fit for everyone. And I think we all need to become more aware of that. And a lot of the students who are in community college, they're like, okay, like, I can work part-time in community college, get all my credits a lot cheaper, and then I can transfer to a four-year university. And I think putting in, like, just, like, those practical measures, like, it might not be for everyone. Like, it might be great that someone can go directly into a four-year university, or, like, if that's not for them, I think people need to be aware of more options of how they can advance themselves in this economy.
And I know in Virginia, I think DC residents are eligible too through the NOVA articulation and guaranteed admission agreement system. So I think DC residents can use the Virginia community college system as well.
Yeah, that's good to know.
Yeah, is excellent, because, right, when we're curing or help assist their mind, their thinking, but also, we also want to help them
To succeed.
proceed on.
Yes,
Otherwise, we're gonna be temporary again.
that's correct, that's correct.
Yeah,
And,
that's a
and
good.
I think it's, if there's a program that is wonderful.
Yes.
And then we can communicate and connect with other, like job training.
Exactly so.
right?
Yes, yes.
So we just completed the second semester, and we are working in partnership with the community colleges in Maryland.
Oh,
Yeah, the Montgomery County College, yes. Because what they do, they go to Montgomery County and talk to the counselors, identify the kids, and bring them to us.
Yeah, so even extending this to Northern Virginia would be great too, because
Yeah.
like it's all generally in the same vicinity, same
Yes.
distance everywhere.
So there is the opportunity.
To learn from each other.
But before you do that, you want to make sure you have the volunteers in place
Right.
to make sure those who can go to the jail, those who be willing to work in college access, those who be willing to go into advocacy. So there are opportunities,
Okay.
to do that.
And I think this is really great because people do have certain talents for different things. So I know a lot of the college students who are more academically minded, they might not feel comfortable discussing ethical dilemmas just like right smack off the bat, because it might be a lot intimidating for some people. So the college access program is a better fit for them because they know that system, they feel comfortable doing it. And it's about like learning like what your strengths are and communicating with people. It might be like if you want to write policy in relation to this, like that might be the best fit for you, and like you can just have a conversation with someone who helps tutor the students and like get ideas from them. Like if you're more of a research person, maybe like writing laws and stuff might be a better fit for you. But like this also like we can feed you information for that if you wanted it.
Okay. So, we're running a little bit over here.
Yeah.
And the snow's coming down again. So I just wanted to spend like a few minutes talking about this other program, which is called the Liberation Prison Project. It's part of FPMT. It's been going on for a number of years. And it helps adult prisoners through a letter writing process. So you apply to participate in the process, and then you will be given the name of a inmate, and this actually occurs around the world, but since we're in the United States, it's going to be an American inmate. And then you just, write letters. The primary reason is to share the Buddhist teachings. You can provide, advice and support in that way. You can help share books or CDs or training courses, and really just be there to listen and be somebody, have that heartfelt connection with. So if you're interested, you can talk to me about it. I just started, so I can't say I have very much, experience. It's kind of a slow process because it's not done through email, right? So you write the letter, and the letter goes, and then the response goes back to the Liberation Prison Project office, and then they forward it to you. So, and there's only one nun taking care of this, for like 70 or 80 inmates. So and she's working 3 part-time jobs. So you can imagine, it's not like in terms of your time, it's going to be like a nice slow pace. You can really put a lot of careful thought into your correspondence. So. Okay.
Thank
All
you,
right.
Jennifer.
So thank you again.
One last
Please.
thing.